Welcome back to Whispered Dark Diaries Tales. Tonight's story isn't about a stranger hiding in the dark. It isn't about a break-in. And it isn't about something supernatural. It's about a uniform. Because we're taught from a young age that certain things mean safety. Locked doors, security desks, badges clipped to a chest. We're taught that if someone belongs somewhere, they'll look the part. That belief is what made this night possible. It was just after midnight when the library announced it was closing. Not late enough to feel dangerous, not early enough to feel busy. The kind of time where people move automatically, packing bags, slipping on headphones, already halfway home in their minds. I stayed later than I meant to. Exam week had blurred my sense of time. By the time I stepped outside, the campus felt thinned out, not empty, just quieter. Lights were still on, pathways were still lit. Security booths were still staffed. That mattered to me then. I crossed the quad alone, phone in my hand, scrolling without really looking at anything. That's when a man stepped out from near the security booth. Not suddenly, not in my path, just present. He wore a campus security uniform, the same one I'd seen 100 times before. Dark jacket, patch stitched on the sleeve, radio clipped to his shoulder. Nothing about him stood out. That should have been the first warning. He smiled and said my name. Not loudly, not warmly. The way people do when they're confirming something. Long night, right? I nodded. He didn't wait for an answer. He told me there had been a report of someone following students near my building. Said they were walking people back until it was cleared. That made sense. Too much sense. He didn't ask for my ID, didn't ask where I was coming from. He already knew which building I lived in. He asked if I wanted an escort. I said yes, of course I did. We started walking. He kept half a step behind me. Not beside me, behind. Like he was watching the space around me instead of me. His radio crackled once. He didn't respond. We walked in silence for a bit before he asked small questions. The kind that sound harmless. Which floor I lived on, if I had roommates, whether my key card had been acting up lately, all things security would ask, all things someone else could use. When we reached my building, he stopped outside. Didn't come in, didn't follow. He stood back and waited while I tapped my card and pulled the door open. I remember glancing over my shoulder. He was already turning away. I slept normally that night. That part still bothers me. The next morning, I mentioned the escort casually. I was standing at the security desk, returning a lost item someone had dropped in the stairwell. I said it lightly, like a thank you. Hey, I just wanted to say the officer who walked me back last night was really professional. The reaction was immediate. Typing stopped. One of them looked up slowly. Another asked me to repeat myself. They asked what time it was, where I'd been walking from, which building. They checked the patrol log. Nothing. No escort assigned. No report of a follower, no officer stationed near the library. They asked if I was sure he was security. I described the uniform, the patch, the radio, the badge clipped to his chest. That's when the room went quiet. One of them leaned closer to the screen. Then he said something that didn't sound serious enough for what it meant. That badge number hasn't been active in years. They told me not to worry. They said people misremember details all the time, that uniforms can look similar, that maybe he was a contractor. They said they'd look into it. They never followed up with me. I found out the rest by accident. A week later, a friend who worked part-time with campus administration mentioned there had been a quiet internal review. Not an investigation, a review. The uniform hadn't been fake. It belonged to a contractor who left the university 3 years earlier. His email had been deactivated. Payroll closed, but his physical credentials? There was no confirmation they'd been returned, no audit trail, no checklist. They assumed he'd turned everything in. They never checked. Once someone started asking questions, the pattern emerged. Other students remembered escorts. Always late, always calm, always helpful, always unlogged. No reports were filed because nothing happened. No one was hurt. No doors were forced. No rules were broken on paper. Most students couldn't remember his face clearly. They remembered how he made them feel instead. Safe. That's what scares me now. Security finally reviewed camera footage. Not from my night. From months earlier, they found him standing near the security office, talking to guards, laughing, wearing the uniform. No one stopped him. Because no one thought to. He wasn't impersonating security. He was allowed to fade into it. Here's the part they never shared publicly. The night he walked me home wasn't the first time he'd done it. It was just the first time someone asked. Years later, I still think about how easily it worked. He didn't need to rush, didn't need to threaten. He didn't even need to pretend very hard. He just needed a uniform that no one remembered to take back, and a system that trusted appearances more than records. That's all for tonight. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next whisper waiting in the dark. And remember, the most dangerous person on campus isn't always the one hiding in the shadows. Sometimes it's the one who learned exactly how to blend in until no one remembers when they started belonging. Sleep well if you can.